Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Claire.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
You have like this bright shirt on. You look so smiley. Looks like it's a great day in Nashville.
It's a great day in Nashville. I usually don't wear my pink shirt that often, but today I thought I'd throw it on. So yeah, it's a good day.
It's awesome. It's awesome. So I'm just going to read kind of your bio to get started. I'm super excited to chat and just want to let folks know kind of who you are and the stuff you're up to in case they don't already. So Jeff Sanders is the author of the best-selling book, The 5 a.m. Miracle, Dominate Your Day Before Breakfast. He is also the host of the 5 a.m. Miracle podcast, which has ranked #1 in iTunes in the self-help and business categories, been nominated for 2 podcast awards, and exceeded 2 million downloads. He is a 10-time marathon runner, personal development junkie, and passionate raw vegan. He is a productivity coach, specializing in helping others dominate their day before breakfast. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in theater and psychology from Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri. He is married to his wife, Tessa, for 6 years. They live in Nashville with their quirky dog, Benny. Quirky dog.
He is very quirky. Today he's been extra quirky. So yeah, a lot of fun.
So some dogs are not quirky then.
I think that most pugs are a little more calm and rational, and ours is far from that. So he's fun. I like him, but he has his moments. So
I love it. So oh, and just an FYI, I feel like it's okay. I'm drinking my green smoothie as we talk.
Oh, nice.
This, but
I do have some black tea here. So
okay, very good, very good.
Stuff.
Just wanted to yay,
Love
raw
it.
veganness. So talk to me about who you really are. I read some sentences there. There was a paragraph talking about the stuff you've done and the, way the world kind of looks at you. But I'd love to kind of know who you really are behind that and how you got here, standing here, working for yourself with the 5 a.m. Miracle on your mic showing right there.
It's a great question. I think that my story really begins probably back in high school. I was doing a lot of theater, and that's kind of where I was realizing that I knew very little about what I wanted to do. I enjoyed theater, and I was doing that because my friends were doing it. And then I got to college and realized, oh wow, I have to choose my life for myself, pick my own major and choose my own classes. And just all of a sudden I realized there's this part of my life I haven't chosen. And so that kind of continued in my 20s, where I was kind of trying to figure out more of myself, which is where I got really obsessed with personal development, really into reading a lot of books and doing experiments and running marathons because why not? It just kind of became this I want to try things mentality. And that's kind of how I've developed into kind of the work that I do now and the things that I'm passionate about. It all stems from this kind of backstory of I don't know who I am and I don't know what I want and I don't know anything about myself. So I'm just going to see what's out there in the world and try things. And that's led to so many fun discoveries and lots of things that I really enjoy. Of course, lots of failed experiences as well, but there's lots of really great things that I want to know more about. And so that's, I think, a lot of kind of who I am as a very curious person, and I like to see what I can go do in the world.
So I want to ask you about this idea of mindset, because I know it's something you've talked about or written about before, and folks are kind of loving the word mindset, but sometimes don't really understand what it means. And I kind of want to get your take on what mindset sort of is and how it has affected you in terms of your own personal development and business development.
Well, I think the mindset for me has always been something that has come second nature to some degree. And by that I mean that I have not taken a lot of my time to be intentional with mindset, mostly because I have, for whatever reason, I don't know why this is, but I am more of a positive person than, let's say, my wife. And she tells me this all the time. She's like, why are you so perky right now? Why are you smiling? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't have an easy answer to that. I know that I do things that make me happy. I know that I run and I love that. I take care of my body. I do things I'm passionate about. And I've realized the more that I do those things, the more likely I am to have a positive mindset. But I also, I catch myself when the mindset's not good. Because I have these positive things that are going well, if I'm having a rough day where I feel like, I'm hard on myself or I'm angry about something, I see that more often than maybe I would have if I wasn't happier a lot. I think that the negative and bad days are more apparent to me. And so I'm asking myself, well, then why was I mad today? Or why was I upset about this? And what am I going to do to change that? I don't think that the positivity for me, for some reason, feels like it's just that's my go-to. I'd rather be positive than upset. I'd rather my day go well than go poorly. But when things don't go well, I really want to change that. I just don't like bad things. And I'm so averse to that. I'm asking myself, well, then how can I eliminate that as fast as possible? which I think that in itself is kind of my mindset around mindsets, is that I want positivity. Like, I don't want negativity. So what am I going to do to guarantee more of that high energy, more of that positivity in my life all the time?
But are you, I just want to clarify. So is positivity the same thing as mindset?
It's not, but that's what allows me to have that's the mindset that I want. Like, I want to think about my life through that lens. And so if I know that that's what I want to be in that space, that mental space of positivity. So that's like my mindset around this, is I want to get myself there. And so that's why I think energy is a huge part of the morning routine, because I know that when I'm energetic, I'm happier. Like, those things flow together. So I'm choosing things that kind of align those things together so I can have a mindset that I want.
And so what do you do kind of on a regular basis to keep your mindset where you want it to be, in terms of outside resources or talking with people or, you know, therapy or friends? Or what are things you do that you think contribute to sort of keeping you on track, aside from just sort of self-reflection, which is really valuable?
Reading a lot of books is definitely part of it. I love to read books that I'm excited about. I love to dig into things that I'm curious about. And books for me challenge me to think differently and to continue that flow of, like, I love the idea, like, new ideas excite me. And so I read a great book and find a new idea, then I get really excited about it. And that adds to that flow. And so I'm looking for new ideas all the time. And that's a big part of it, whether that comes from a conference or a great conversation or from a book. I love to kind of have that freshness and newness around me. And that, to me, is where passion comes from and positivity comes from. So if anything, that's what I'm looking for all the time, is a way to kind of create that sense of newness and freshness. And I think books are where I usually start, and then from there it expands.
I totally agree with that. You know, when I think about sort of some of the key moments where my life has changed, or when I've started on new paths, I mean, it's like 80% of them come from books I read or, you know, authors that inspired me in some way. And I think to some people that sounds strange, because it's not even someone you necessarily meet in person, or it's not even like a speech you're listening to. It's really just reading in a book, but how that starts you on a new path towards health or wellness or being an entrepreneur or whatever it may be. I think it's just absolutely critical. And kind of undervalued.
Oh, definitely. I think books for me is kind of what jump-started the work that I do today. I mean, I read books that inspired me and then asked the question, well, how could I be like this author? How can I be like this speaker or this podcaster? Like, I want to do those things because they're inspiring me, they're challenging me, and I want to do the exact same thing with someone else. And so that's where my kind of, you know, career took off, was when I realized that I had this passion around growth and improvement, and that started from books.
So talk to me more about that. So it starts from books, and then what? How does reading a book lead into you building this career as an entrepreneur and, you know, speaker and author on your own?
Well, I graduated college, and my first job was in door-to-door sales, and my boss gave me a John Maxwell book and said, you have to read this book in your first week on the job. And I had never read a book like that in my entire life, and so I said, fine, I'll read it the first week of the job, I have to. And I was amazed by it immediately, just like floored by this book. And I asked him, I was like, where can I get more of these? Like, this is fantastic. And that led me on this journey of that self-discovery, the personal growth that came from that, just absorbing as much as I possibly could. And I realized over the course of the next few years, working these different day jobs I had, I didn't like any of them. I was looking for something different for my life. And I was spending my nights and weekends consuming all this material. And that's when I realized, like, I want to be in this space. Like, I want to be the kinds of people who are inspiring people like me right now. And so that's when I realized, well, then okay, what's the path going to look like for me to be an author or a speaker or a podcaster or a blogger? And so it started with, I'll make a website, I'll start blogging, I'll just start creating content. And then it just kind of, as a side hustle, it grew from there to where I can now do it full time.
And so in that process, aside from books, were sort of there other key guides along the way that helped you? Because, I mean, you started from this position where you were in a completely different career and you saw what you wanted, but you probably didn't exactly know how to get there. Maybe you knew some of the tools or methods that you needed to employ, but that doesn't mean you necessarily knew how to do them well, essentially. So were there kind of guides or people along the way that pointed you in the right direction, essentially?
Depending on where I was in different seasons of my life, I've definitely sought out different people. I know that Michael Hyatt has been a huge inspiration for me in a number of ways. When I was running marathons, it was Dean Karnazes. When I was looking at different health books, there was different, a variety of doctors who wrote books that I loved. I think that I found people who had the answers at the time that I wanted them. And I was always looking for, like, who's the next kind of brilliant mind I want to tap into to discover this next area of growth. And so when I was, running my marathons, I looked at, Jeff Galloway as a really popular marathon coach. And I read a ton of his stuff. And I was just like, how can I get more of whatever the expert is teaching? Because I want to learn that best stuff and then apply it myself and then turn around and share it later on. But I want to kind of be a part of that process and learning from those people who are, leading the way. And there's so many different people. I mean, I've read, hundreds of books at this point. Like, I don't know which ones are the most inspirational. I know that all of them have contributed in various ways.
That's amazing. And so now do you feel like when you look back and you now see, you have this podcast with 2.5 million downloads and this best-selling book, like you've obviously inspired people and guided people now in many ways, right? When you look back, does it seem like you're sort of in a natural place, or are you sort of still surprised that you are all of a sudden the guide?
Both. I think that this is, in many ways, I have always wanted to be where I am today, and I'm super happy that that's even possible. But I'm still kind of, at the same time, I'm still very much on a journey myself, learning and growing all the time. So for someone to think of me as an expert, I think is a little premature. Like, I don't feel like that's an appropriate term, but I definitely feel like I have gone through enough and learned enough that I am totally willing to share my experiences and talk about lessons I've learned, failures, successes, whatever it is. I love that process of learning and growth and trying new things. And that's where it all started for me. It was me just sharing my experiences, and that's what I do still. Like, I mean, the book that I wrote was me kind of taking the best ideas and those things that stuck around that worked well, but there's a whole other 10 books I could have written of things that did not work well. And so that's kind of the process of how it all comes together.
So talk to me a little bit about what it means to write a book and then have people come to you and say, this is how you've changed my life. Because obviously that has happened many, many, many times with you after writing the 5 a.m. Miracle. And, probably you hoped for that. I don't know if you predicted it would happen to the extent that it has. But what does that mean? What has that journey been like?
I mean, it's remarkable because I think that when I live my life day to day, I get excited about things, but I have no idea if somebody else is going to care about that. Like, I have no clue if me being excited about a 5 a.m. wake up call is going to mean something to somebody else. Yeah. But yet that small piece, like if it changed my life in a significant way, there's got to be somebody else out there who the same thing happened to them. And so I think that when I started to get these responses back and these reviews on the book and people were so excited about it, it was just not just like validation that the book was good, but more so surprise, like, wow, this stuff really is working. Like, it not just works in my life, but it is effective for somebody else. And so I love that whole process. I think it's just awesome stuff.
I think there's kind of this other element of being an author, particularly if you write in kind of a nonfiction how-to space, essentially, of as soon as you put something down, then you are kind of more accountable to yourself also, which is pretty interesting, I think, particularly in the space of sort of productivity or self-development.
I think the hardest part there is that, this is a story I told in the book, actually. I was at a wedding about a year ago when I stayed up really late, the night of the wedding, and the next morning, my friend snuck in my hotel room and took a photo of me next to the alarm clock that said 9:45. And they posted it on Twitter. They're like, haha, look at Jeff, but like, yes, like, people want to hold me accountable to my own message, and like, I'm totally fine with that. I'm also very willing to share the fact that I'm not perfect in any way and not trying to be. So it comes with territory.
That's great. So when you think about sort of the ways that you help and guide others these days, do you think of it as a sort of one-to-many thing? Essentially, you guide many people through writing one message, whether it's on a blog or in a podcast or in a book, or how do you think about the way kind of you support or serve others?
I think it's changed over time. I started off with that mentality of I want to kind of serve everybody. And then over time, it's really shifted to, how can I take like one person's story and go help them? Because I've found that the more individual emails I receive and the people that I'm talking to, like, I'm creating content for those individuals because once again, the idea that if it changed my life, someone else is going to find that relevant. Well, if I can solve one person's problem, that'll solve a lot of other problems at the same time. And so that's been my approach recently, is shifting gears to asking, how can I go solve those very specific problems for individuals? Because that has a bigger application. And it's still work in progress for me in a lot of ways to kind of dig into the psyche of other people or their habits or routines. But I'm finding that to be really interesting because that's where the real growth is taking place, is someone's story and what are they doing differently today and how does that pan out to the bigger picture.
So essentially taking someone's story, using it as a case study, helping them, and then using it so that others can learn from it?
Yeah, exactly.
That's really powerful. Right. And I can see how it's interesting when people have such a strong message like you do and such a clear message. sometimes they have to make sort of this choice between working with people one-on-one or kind of just generating content that many can read and view and listen to. And so it's interesting that you say essentially by using case studies and working with people one-on-one, you're able to basically bridge that gap.
Yeah, I think that also doing a lot of one-on-one coaching showed me the exact same thing, because I was taking these messages that I assumed applied to a lot of people, and I was now saying, well, okay, you coaching client, go try and do this. And they're like, oh, that doesn't work for me. I was like, oh, well, why not? And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I realized, like, okay, the approach that I had wasn't working. How do I tweak that? How do I make sure that individuals could actually benefit from this? Because that's the whole point. Like, if a person can't, grow from what I'm teaching, then it's not working. So I have to find a way to make sure that's possible.
So I want to ask, now you're kind of at this stage where you've achieved a lot of the goals you've set for yourself in terms of working for yourself and having a best-selling book and this great podcast and doing a lot of what you dreamed of. Now you're doing it. So how do you approach the idea of sort of learning still now when you are really kind of the one conveying information or learnings and teachings to others? How do you balance learning versus teaching?
That's a great question. I think that the teaching that I'm doing now is coming from the learning that I'm doing in a lot of ways. And so as I read more books or go to more conferences or meet new people, like I am constantly realizing all the time how little I know. So as much as I think that I know a lot, I think that the more I know, the more I realize I don't know anything. And I think that's what blows my mind all the time. Because I'll listen to a great podcast and be like, wait, what did they say? Oh my gosh, I missed all of this part of life. So how am I going to learn? I mean, just last week was a good example. My parents were in town in Nashville visiting me, and we went and re-landscaped the front of my house. And I know nothing about landscaping. And I realized as we were doing this, like, I have no idea how to plant a flower. I have no idea where to get the soil. What kind of soil do you use? Where's the nitrogen in the soil? Like, I don't know any of these things. But I know they all matter, and now I'm learning a lot about it. And so that, to me, is just a fascinating thing, that there's so much of life that I just don't know. And that, once again, is the curiosity piece. But I want to know. And the more of that I know, I can kind of tag that into my content and then, share life lessons that I've learned from these kind of everyday experiences.
I love that. And I think it's such an interesting, it's easy sometimes when we get busy and when we become successful to forget about learning, and particularly not just to forget about learning in your sphere, but to forget about learning outside of that. So you're talking about, learning to plant flowers or something, which is not something you generally teach people about on a daily basis. It's not like you learning a new productivity technique, but it is super important to sharpening the saw of your mind and your own kind of trajectory towards success. I love that.
I think a lot of ways that I've talked about productivity for a long time, and I think that a lot of ways, like, I have created a system for that, and I use that system, and the question does come up, well, then what's the next step in that? Is there what's the next evolution of the 5 a.m. miracle? Is it, the 4 a.m. miracle? Do I have to, like, up the ante a little more? It's like, I don't think that's the answer. So I am, in a lot of ways, still exploring kind of what does all that look like? What is the next kind of phase and kind of my own journey? And then how does that, pan out to, the entire brand and what I'm developing? And that's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers necessarily, but I like that process of exploring and figuring out what's next.
Well, and that process of exploring is, I think, key to being sort of an interesting, dynamic human. So,
true.
That's my 2 cents. This has been really great. Thank you so much. Can you kind of share what you're really focused on right now and where folks can find out more about you and learn about your work and listen to your podcast and read your book and that kind of stuff?
Sure. I think that the next big phase I'm working on is more public speaking. It's kind of the one thing I have not spent a lot of time in yet. So in terms of my own learning and development, that's where I'm really focused right now is more kind of public talks and traveling and things of that nature that I haven't done as much of. But in terms of people finding more about what I'm doing, jeffsanders.com is the place to be for that. The 5A Miracle podcast is on iTunes, and the 5A Miracle book is on Amazon. And that's basically it.
I love it. Thanks. And are there any key podcast episodes that you would highly recommend?
The Weekly Review podcast episode, which off the top of my head, I think it was episode 38, but I can making that up.
Okay.
Weekly Review is definitely a big one. There's an episode where I actually read the original version of the 5 a.m. Miracle ebook, the one that started this whole thing. I think that's interesting too, because it's kind of me before I knew what I was doing, and that's on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
I think that you go back to the first episode of my podcast, I was really just kind of like flying by the seat of my pants. I'm like, let's just talk about early mornings. Yay! Like, it was not at all focused. Whereas now it's like I have a very specific system. So that evolution is going to be kind of fun. But there are definitely episodes that talk about those structures. They're in the book, weekly reviews, focusing. There's an episode all about focus that I love. So those are the places to start, I think.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for this. This is great.
Yeah, thank you.